What the fuck?
What the fucking at?
Cisa asked for my Instagram.
He wants to be your buddy.
It's the worst thing you could say to someone after a first date.
Yeah, that's a bit crazy. But maybe he's just stupid. You don't
Whatever.
know.
No, because we had the conversation. Like, we both agreed that we were looking for a relationship, but if not, a friendship.
Okay.
And he, like, immediately was like, buddy.
It's a little crazy.
Yeah.
Kindle. Alright, do you remember what happened last time?
Remind me.
Shilian got assigned to find the Brocade Immortal, which is like an escaped piece of clothing, and then we heard the backstory about it, about like the fairy tale about it, about how some mentally challenged guy who like had the power to ascend got it as a gift from his beloved, and then he was like, why can't my arms fit through? Why can't my legs fit through? Why can't my head fit
Right.
through? And so they're meant to find it, and like Shilian was like, oh, we'll find it or something. I don't remember what he even thought. But then he's alone with Long Ying, and he went and he took a bath, and Long Ying was acting weird, and Xuan Zhen tried to sneak
Right.
in and put gold bars in the thing, and then Shilian was taking a bath, and then Long Ying came in and grabbed Xuan Zhen and brought him out again, and like refused to look at Shilian.
Right.
And then a lady came knocking on the door and was like, buy my wares. Like, do you want to swap clothes or whatever? You want to buy my clothes or whatever? And then Shilian's like, oh my god, this has got to be it. And then they like knock off her hood, and it's like an old hag. So, the ending of that. Where the hell is it? Fucking skipped ahead to look how long the chapter was. The end of that chapter was, and this girl wasn't an ordinary girl. After the scream and the jump, her headscarf was knocked off by Royer's ambush and fell to the ground. Although the bottom half of her face was bewitching, the top half was wrinkled and aged, forming a horrifying contrast. What girl? She was clearly an 80-year-old hag. Oh yeah, Royer like jumped out of the clothes and attacked her.
Right. Right.
They have such a crazy word for this woman. Chapter 69.
Dude, 69.
Separating colors, dye house wide open. It was a half maquillage woman. Maquillage is like a French word for makeup. So she's half of her face is makeup, I guess, is what they're trying to imply.
Okay.
And they keep calling her this. The half maquillage woman was a low level ghost formed by the jealousy of older women towards young girls. Unable to accept the inevitability of aging, they were convinced that consuming the blood and flesh of young girls could restore their youth. They liked to squeak in high-pitched tones to fake maidenly voices, but as the saying goes, eyes are the windows to the soul. They couldn't hide their old age, no matter how hard they tried. The bottom half of their face would appear younger the more blood and flesh they consumed, but the upper half that held the eyes would age faster. The stark contrast was far more horrifying than normal aging, but they would still stubbornly refuse to see the error of their ways. Shilian emerged dripping from the bath and set a foot on the edge of the water tub, poised to take her down with a leaping attack. But at the very moment Xuan Yizhen seemed to return from the brink of death, he shot to his feet and let loose a mighty slap. Oh yeah, Xuan Yizhen ate his food and he was passed out. The half-maquillage woman was just too weak, and she was knocked to the ground with a wailing cry. "Have mercy!" Chilian unhurriedly grabbed his cultivation robes and casually draped them over himself. "So you're the one who stole the brocade immortal?" "It wasn't me! It wasn't me!" the half-maquillage woman quickly pleaded. "I wouldn't dare break into the Temple of Divine Might." That was almost certainly true, if Chilian thought about it. A low-level ghost like this really wouldn't have the guts to break into a Temple of Divine Might so rashly, lest she be blown to smithereens. Besides, this half-maquillage woman probably had no connection to the brocade immortal. By a rough estimate, her ghost age was 80-something, while the brocade immortal was centuries old. "Then where did you get your hands on this brocade robe?" Chilian questioned. The half-maquillage woman picked up her headscarf and covered the top half of her face anew. To answer Dao Zhang," her voice shrieked high again, I found it while browsing the shops in Ghost City." "You could do that? Find something like that while browsing the shops in Ghost City?" Chilian was speechless for a moment. Then he asked, "Who sold it to you?" "Dao Zhang, I beg you, please let me off the hook," the half-maquillage woman anxiously begged. "I don't know. It's not like businesses in the Ghost City need to have 18 generations of ancestry checked." That was true, too. If starting a business there required such a thorough background check, Ghost City wouldn't be nearly as bustling. Commerce could only come alive if there was room for loopholes. Chilian interrogated her for a while, but it was fruitless. After determining that this half-maquillage woman was no more than a clueless little minion, he called to Xuan Yizhen. "Qi Ying, have one of your heavenly officials come to collect this female ghost." But Xuan Yizhen replied, "No, I don't have any heavenly officials in my palace." "Not a single one?" Chilian asked. "You've never appointed any deputy generals?" "Nope," Xuan Yizhen answered unapologetically. As it turned out, the martial god of the West always operated alone. He'd never appointed anyone to any position, not even a helper to manage the day-to-day essentials. At least for Chilian, it was because he couldn't afford it. Xuan Yizhen's situation could probably only be explained by his eccentric character. With no other choice, Chilian fumbled for a clay jar and used it to seal the half-maquillage woman away. Then he took the brocade robe from Lang Ying's hands and shook it open to inspect it. His brows knitted slightly. It certainly was wicked, but what was the best way to describe it? In Chilian's opinion, its evil chi was oddly superficial, like it was nothing more than a heavy layer of powder and rouge rather than emitted from deep within. Chilian's gut told him that this thing wasn't as dangerous as the rumors said, but he was still on guard. Xuan Yizhen glanced at the robe. "It's fake." Chilian was taken aback. "How do you know?" "It's fake," Xuan Yizhen repeated. "I've seen the real brocade immortal before. It's way more powerful than that thing." "When did you see it?" Chilian asked, curious. "There are actually quite a few people who have seen the brocade immortal before, but they still couldn't identify it. So how are you so certain?" Xuan Yizhen fell silent. At that very moment, Ling Wen reached out to him via the spiritual communication array. "Your Highness, we've just received information that there is a little ghost with the brocade immortal in hand, spotted about 10 kilometers from your Puqi shrine." Her voice rang in his ear. "We'll need you to trouble you to go take a look." "Another one?" "All right," Chilian replied. Then he glanced at Xuan Yizhen, and without making a sound, he asked within the array, "Oh, by the way, one more thing. Ling Wen, has Qi Ying seen the brocade immortal before?" "Qi Ying?" Ling Wen said. "He didn't just see it. It was much more than that." "What do you mean?" Chilian asked. "It's complicated," Ling Wen replied. "Is your Highness aware that His Highness Qi Ying wasn't always the martial god who ruled the West? That role was once held by His Highness Yin Yu." Chilian recalled the Windmaster telling him this while he stripped during their adventure in Paradise Manor, and he couldn't help but feel his heart squeeze. "I've heard that before. Weren't the two Highnesses Shishang and Shidi a pair of martial brothers-in-arms? Back before Yin Yu ascended, he was their sect's head disciple. One day he saw a brash little street urchin, and in a moment of soft-heartedness he asked his Shifu to take the boy in. The child was Xuan Yizhen. They were peers for many years, and Yin Yu always took very good care of Xuan Yizhen. He ascended first, and even appointed Xuan Yizhen as a deputy general. "You've met Qi Ying a few times, so you should know," Ling Wen said. "He's a little bit socially unaware." "That's a good thing," Shilian said. Ling Wen chuckled. "Good or not depends on the person and the situation. Some people think he's a selfish, loose cannon, ignorant of manners, who doesn't give people the respect they deserve. If it wasn't for His Highness Yin Yu taking the heat on his behalf and smoothing things over when he first set foot in the heavenly court, who knows how many people would have tried to pulverize him." "Those two highnesses must share a very good relationship, then," Shilian mused. "It was good at first," Ling Wen said. "But unfortunately, later on, Qi Ying also ascended." Both ascended from western lands, so how should it be handled? Thus the two agreed to rule the West together. Shi Shang and Shi Di presiding over their domain together. It sounded like a beautiful tale, but at the end of the day, one mountain could not support two tigers. If Yin Yu's abilities could be called 1 in a million, worthy of a heavenly tribulation sent forth from the heavens, then Xuan Yizhen's abilities could carry him through 3 heavenly tribulations. In fact, maybe not even 1 in a million possessed such potential. It was fine at the beginning, as the gap between them wasn't so obvious, but the more time passed, the larger the rift grew. Xuan Yizhen was clearly antisocial. Not only did he not attempt to build relationships with his fellow heavenly colleagues, he also never tried to ingratiate himself with his devotees. He actually did the opposite. He didn't bother to remember the names of any heavenly officials aside from Yin Yu, and he was audacious enough to regularly tell off and even beat up his followers. He was as out of line as they came, but his domain grew bigger and bigger, and the number of his followers only increased. In comparison, the palace of Yin Yu began to lose its shine. Finally, the palace of Yin Yu grew restless. This Shi Shang and Shi Di always gave each other presents on their birthdays, and one year, Yin Yu gave Xuan Yizhen a mighty suit of armor. "The Brocade Immortal?" Shilian asked. "That's right," Ling Wen said. Not only could the Brocade Immortal drain blood from and kill its wearer, but it also had an even more unusual ability. If a person was given the robe as a gift, they would be forced to obey every command of the one who gave it to them. Since both Shi Shang and Shi Di had always been friendly with each other, Xuan Yizhen put the armor on without a second thought. Soon after, Yin Yu played a seemingly unintentional joke, while Xuan Yizhen was under the control of the Brocade Immortal. And Xuan Yizhen, with his mind possessed, did exactly as he was told. If not for Junwu, who noticed something amiss and stopped him in time, Xuan Yizhen would have cut off his own head and dribbled it like a ball. "That incident was a huge deal at the time. It caused quite the uproar," Ling Wen said. "Naturally, Yin Yu was banished from his esteemed heavenly position then and there, after harming one of his heavenly colleagues." Logically, the two of them should have fallen out afterwards. But Shilian recalled that silly play the worshippers of the palace of Qi Ying put on during the Mid-Autumn Festival banquet. The clown jumping up and down behind Xuan Yizhen's back was most likely Yin Yu, and yet Xuan Yizhen's reaction was outrage, followed by his leaping down to the mortal realm to knock some heads. "I believe Qi Ying still thinks very highly of His Highness Yin Yu. Might there have been a misunderstanding?" "Who knows?" Ling Wen said. "Whether or not there was a misunderstanding, the person in question has been banished for so many years now, so who cares?" Shilian nodded and was about to bid her farewell when Ling Wen added, "Wait, Your Highness, there's more. I wasn't done earlier. 30 kilometers out from your Puqi shrine, there was another unknown creature with the Brocade Immortal in hand." "Isn't that a little too far? And why are there 2? Shilian asked. "I'm not done," Ling Wen said. "Listen well. 22 kilometers to the northwest, 7.5 kilometers southeast, 11 kilometers north." After reporting 27 or 28 locations in one breath, Ling Wen finally finished. "Yeah, that's about it for now." By the time she was done reporting, Shilian had forgotten everything and felt rather woeful. Your palace is quite efficient this time, isn't it? But for now, are you saying there might be more? Could Ghost City be distributing brocade immortals? Pretty much, Ling Wen replied. In Ghost City, there are many peddlers of unknown origins who sell counterfeits while wearing fake skins. They change skins once they're done, so those in the know usually don't randomly buy things off the street. Still, there are ghosts who think of it like hunting for antiques, and like the thrill of hoping they hit the jackpot. Many small-time vendors in the ghost realm heard through the grapevine that the brocade immortal has been stolen, and are using this chance to scam buyers, saying any random robe they dug up is the real deal. Unbelievably enough, there are still quite a few ghosts who fall for it and try the robes out on people. It's really giving us intel gatherers a headache. This would thoroughly interfere with their search for the real brocade immortal. With so many brocade immortals popping up everywhere, it would be impossible to find the real one. However, since they were assigned the mission, they had to come up with a way to complete it. I guess we should start with the closest one and search from there, Shilian said. Shilian didn't have any spiritual powers, Xuan Yizhen didn't know how to draw the teleportation array, and neither of them had any deputy officials. But of the locations Ling Wen had given, thankfully the closest to them was an abandoned dye house only 2.5 kilometers out. Without further ado, even though it was the middle of the night, they hastily departed. At first, Shilian was going to make Lang Ying stay behind at Puchi Shrine. Your webcam's, going spastic. It was, green for a second.
I need a new one.
At first, Shilian was going to make Lang Ying stay behind at Puchi Shrine, but he tagged along and refused to be ushered back. Shilian figured this trip shouldn't be too dangerous and could help give Lang Ying some experience. He was planning to train the boy in cultivation anyway, so he was allowed to stick around. The three hurried on their way under the cover of night. As they ran along, they heard creepy voices chanting a work song from the road ahead. Hey, hey, ho! Hey, hey, ho! Hearing the familiar work song, Shilian stopped in his steps. A giant shadow gradually emerged from the mist ahead, along with 4 ghost fires floating around it. Xuan Yizhen was poised to make a move, ready to beat it down without asking a single question, but Shilian pulled him back. Don't worry, I know them. Sure enough, 4 golden skeletons carrying a step-litter appeared before them. Xuan Yizhen had never seen anything so magical before, and his eyes went wide and shimmering. Is this your highness, the crown prince of Shenle? The head skeleton sang. It is. May I help you? Shilian answered. No troubles here, the golden skeleton sang. We brothers have time on our hands and wanted to inquire if His Highness the Crown Prince is in a hurry. Perhaps we can give you a ride? The journey wasn't long, so Shilian wanted to decline, but Xuan Yizhen cut in and exclaimed, Yes! He was already eagerly climbing aboard and looked like he really wanted to give this strange but majestic step-litter a try. Shilian didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He just stumbled up to grab Xuan Yizhen when the step-litter tipped and chucked the intruder out. Shilian swayed as well, but someone steadied him. Son, he blurted out, but when he looked back, it was Lang Ying. He'd climbed on without anyone noticing and was holding tightly onto Shilian's arm. A pair of inky black eyes watched him silently. The skeletons hastily picked up the step-litter, and their 8 legs spun like 4 fiery wheels. They dashed steadily away while shouting into the night. Move! Move! Don't block the way! Don't block the way! Xuan Yizhen was heartlessly thrown onto the ground, but he jumped to his feet, clearly not giving up. He was determined to leap on, but the skeletons were too fast, and he was always a step behind. He remained in hot pursuit, looking like he really, really wanted to ride in the step-litter, just to feel the thrill, just once. Shilian watched Xuan Yizhen give chase so vigorously as he rode along, and he couldn't help but feel that this was a little mean. Wasn't this like they were bullying a child? And there's a cute picture of Xuan Yizhen running next to it. Hold on. I have to start showing the art because Sal's gonna watch.
Oh, that is cute. Dude, The skeletons.
He's just a little autistic guy.
Yeah, many such cases.
Even though he knew the step-litter belonged to Hua Cheng, and he might not welcome other heavenly officials riding it, he couldn't help but ask, can't this litter carry 3 people? It can't! It can only seat 2, the skeletons sang. They ran at top speed the entire way, and Xuan Yizhen chased them the whole time. Once they arrived at their destination, the golden skeletons allowed Shi Lian and Lang Ying to disembark, then picked up the step-litter and ran off, speedily disappearing from sight. In the end, Xuan Yizhen never managed to board it, and he watched the step-litter disappear with extreme disappointment and visible longing. Shi Lian stepped off the litter, holding Lang Ying's hand. Ahead of them, he could hear loud cries and wails coming from that abandoned dye house. Shi Lian was puzzled. Didn't Ling Wen say this dye house was abandoned? As they walked closer, the wailing voices grew clearer. This lowly one won't ever dare to sell counterfeits in old Lord Hua Chengzu's territory again. We'll never do it again. But please take the good old Chengzu. Tell the good old Chengzu that I got those fake brocade immortals from other ghosts. I'm a victim too. The 3 arrived at the dye house and bumped into a black-clad, ghost-masked man, who had only just emerged from within. It seemed he'd been waiting for a long time, and he bent slightly to greet them. Your Highness. The voice belonged to the officer who had once helped Shi Lian by catching Lang Ying on the streets of Ghost City. At the time, Shi Lian had seen a cursed shackle on his wrist. The Windmaster had once told him that this person might be Yin Yu, as there were only so many heavenly officials who had been banished in recent years. Shi Lian asked, How do I address you, sir? Please, Your Highness, I am but a nobody, the masked man replied. As they entered the abandoned dye house, Shi Lian was blown away. There were all kinds of clothes hung on countless wooden racks. Wedding robes, government attire, lady satin, uniforms, children's clothes. There were also crude hemp shirts stained with copious amounts of blood. So much, it was like they were afraid people couldn't tell that there was something off about them. Piles upon piles, layers upon layers, and they were all sinister and heavy with evil chi, like each and every one was a living corpse standing before them. Even if they weren't the brocade immortal, they certainly couldn't be anything good. Long strips of fabric dyed in many colors hung high from the wooden stacks, some ghastly white, some filthy. It had been a long time since anyone had last touched them. Xuan Yizhen crouched next to a large black vat of dye and became singularly fixated on the contents. The fluid had a funny color and emitted a strange smell. Shi Lian was afraid that he was going to dip his finger in it and lick it at any second, so he hastily dragged him away. Outside in the yard, a band of ghosts were bound by a single iron chain, and they crouched low, hugging their heads. This is, Shi Lian wondered. All the nefarious creatures guilty of selling the brocade immortal in Ghost City are here, as are those who attempted to use it anywhere nearby, the ghost masked man answered. A total of 98 pieces of clothing have been collected. 98 pieces, and they must have all been caught extremely quickly. Shi Lian was slightly touched. If there's any new movement, we will proceed with the utmost haste on your Highness's behalf, the ghost masked man continued. Hearing this, Shi Lian couldn't help but say, There's no need. Please tell son Hua Chengzi that he really doesn't need to trouble himself like this. I can take care of it myself, too. The results would have been the same. It just would have taken a little more time and energy. He was a titled heavenly official working for the heavens, after all. Even if he didn't have many worshippers, this was still his job. Naturally, Chengzi understands that your Highness is capable of doing this effortlessly, the masked man replied. But this is also precisely why he hopes my lord won't waste energy on small errands that anyone could accomplish. Your Highness's time and efforts should be spent on more important matters. Shi Lian deliberated for a moment, but in the end he still asked, May I ask how your Chengzi is doing right now? Lang Ying nonchalantly swayed back and forth next to Shi Lian. Chengzi is very busy at the moment, the ghost masked man replied. Oh, that's good, Shi Lian said quickly. Hopefully everything goes well for him. I wish him success. They questioned every single ghost that had been arrested, and each and every one was adamant that their product had been distributed to them by a mysterious masked individual. They didn't seem to be lying. But in a place like Ghost City, how many hundreds of masked individuals roam the streets every day? The interrogation was fruitless, and so the ghost masked man yanked on the chain and bid them farewell as he led those yowling ghosts away. The 98 pieces of ghost clothing were left behind. Julien felt that in all the years he had spent collecting old clothes, he had never seen so many in one place. As he rummaged through them, he suspected that not a single one was the real thing. "Chi-Ying, why don't you come and take a look?" he said to Xuan Yizhen. However, Xuan Yizhen only scratched beneath his loose curly hair and shook his head. Too many. Too many ghost robes. Every single piece of cloth emitted evil chi, now all intermingled. It made it impossible to tell what each one was. If someone possessed a sharp sense of taste, they would be able to differentiate between the flavors of candied pear and apple stuffing, but they could hardly do the same if 98 different kinds of fruit stuffing were mixed together and presented to them to try. Julien tried to think of another method, but when he turned his head to look, he saw Xuan Yizhen had picked up a robe and was about to try it on then and there. Julien hastily stopped him and hung the robe back on the rack. Stop. Chi-Ying, let's agree on two things first. On two things. First, don't put random things in your mouth. And second, don't put on random clothes. Those are both very dangerous things to do. Xuan Yizhen pointed behind Julien. Then what about him? Julien suddenly smelled something burning, and he followed the direction of Xuan Yizhen's pointing finger. Lang Ying had lit a match he had found in some corner, and was calmly setting the bottom hem of a ghost robe ablaze with practiced ease. "Don't play with fire, either!" Julien exclaimed. The ghost robe seemed to feel pain from being burned. Its hem rolled upwards, and it was twisting like mad, trying to get away. It looked more like a live eel than a piece of clothing. The image, surprisingly, looked rather cruel, and although Julien could smell burning, there was no evidence of it on the fabric. It appeared these ghost robes had soaked in enough yin energy they had resisted destruction by fire. Let me drink water. Julien was just wrangling a man-child and a real child.
Yeah.
Upon hearing Julien telling him not to play with fire, Lang Ying casually tossed the match and stepped on it to put out the flames, looking entirely obedient once more. Julien didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and he walked over. "What's with you today?" He trailed off and his face stiffened. This was because he saw, not too far away, a long white piece of fabric hanging high up on a rack and gently fluttering in the night breeze. The silhouette of a human was slowly creeping across the cloth's surface. This shadow had no head. Julien pulled Lang Ying behind him. With one swift movement he drew his sword and slashed. "Everyone, watch out!" His swing cut the fabric and the shadow in half. However, when the cloth landed on the ground, there was nothing behind it. The headless silhouette had disappeared. Julien had no chance to rush over to check before he felt a chill on his neck. He snapped his head back, and his pupils shrank. A beautifully dressed woman had appeared silently behind him. No, it wasn't a woman, but a robe. What he had just slashed in half was also a robe, and once it fell to the ground, it was covered by other textiles. From all around, countless humanoid figures emerged, swaying and rocking slowly, gathering around the three of them. They had hung those 98 ghost robes in the yard, on the verandas, and inside the dye house, and somehow, without realizing it, all the robes had struggled free of the racks. Julien was dumbfounded. "They were all fine before. What's going on?" Beside him came a quiet voice. "That agitation of ghosts." Julien turned his head to look, and the one who spoke was Lang Ying. Although his expression showed no unease, veins were bulging on the back of his pale hands. He was very obviously being affected by something as well. Another wave of ghost agitation. As the day when Mount Tonglu would open its gates approached, its tremors grew more and more deafening in the ears of ghosts to remind them. The first thing Julien thought was, "How is San Lan doing?" However, the current situation didn't give him much time to think. While his mind was rapidly spinning, over 20 ghost robes had flung themselves over. Xuan Yizhen swung his fist without a second thought. If that punch landed on the wall or on the ground, it would surely rock the earth, But this 1,000-pound fist collided with nothing but clothes. Even children know that in rock, scissors, cloth, cloth traps rock, and that light, malleable cloth was perfect for subduing fists. No matter how hard he launched his punches, the fabric could simply wrap around them and incurred no damage. Only Shilian's sword was effective. But those ghost robes were extremely light and agile as they evaded. A simple spring backward could put over a dozen meters between them. Since they barely weighed anything, there was practically no sound or breath of air that gave away their movement. Avoiding their ambushes was much more difficult than avoiding a human opponent. Usually it was people who picked clothes, but now it was clothes picking people. The 98 ghost robes each eagerly searched for a body that fit them, a person they fancied. Among humans, it was women who loved picking out clothes. Among ghost robes, it was the female styles that loved picking out humans. Dozens of long ladies' skirts, all in different colors and styles, urgently pressed themselves against Shilian. Even the threat of his sword couldn't force them away. It was a battle more heated than a group of women fighting over a pretty robe they fancied. Shilian was surrounded by blooming flowers and silk, squeezed between those female robes and pulled from all directions. Xuanzhen yanked off several pieces of children's clothing that were stubbornly trying to lower themselves over his head and tossed them aside. He was puzzled as he looked at Shilian. "How come all the women's clothes like you so much?" he wondered. "Maybe because they think I look friendlier?" Shilian answered. However, not a single ghost robe went to harass Lang Ying. Perhaps they knew he was also a ghost, and that there would be no point in siphoning from him. So they didn't approach. Shilian swung his sword and sliced a number of ladies' dresses, but the robes were cut in half. The robes that were cut in half still moved as they wished, their dodges even more agile. From the corner of his eye, Shilian saw several ghost robes sneaking towards the window. "Close the door! Cast an array! Don't let them out!" he shouted. With 2 gods and 1 ghost on hand, they could deal with this situation, but it would be a bit more difficult if the ghost robes snuck outside to seek trouble. His shout came too late, though. The dyed house's yard was open air, and a long robe was already outside, fluttering its expansive sleeves. It soared into the air like a giant bat, and shot away into the night sky. Shilian groaned mentally, then shouted, "Qi Ying! I'll leave the dye house to you!" Then he pushed off with the soles of his feet and flew outside the walls, catching the bottom hem of that long ghost robe. The long robe tried in vain to flutter its sleeves as hard as it could, but with the added weight of an entire person, it couldn't help but plummet to the ground. Shilian still held its hem in a death grip. However, it was exceedingly cunning, and with a loud rip, it tore off its own corner like a warrior chopping off his own arm. It hastily slipped away from Shilian's hands. A random passerby happened to be on his way home after a night of drinking, and he screamed in fright at the sight of a headless creature flying at him. "Ah! A headless ghost! It's headless!" Shilian charged over and seized the robe again, then showed it to the passerby to comfort him. Don't be scared, see? It's not headless, there's no body in there at all." The passerby looked, and sure enough, it was completely empty inside the folds of that robe. This was definitely more horrifying than a headless ghost, and his eyes rolled back as he fainted on the spot. Shilian quickly caught him and gently laid him on the ground. "So sorry, I'll take care of this right away." After the chaos was over, Shilian could finally get to work on seizing all the ghost robes that had flown out of the dye house. He counted them, making sure not a single piece was missing, before letting out a sigh of relief. Let me sip. After that chaos was over... With things settled, Shilian said, "I suppose our only option is to use Qi Ying's simple, crude method. Let's try each of these robes on and see." He wouldn't have minded putting them on himself, but that could go badly for his 2 partners. If he did actually put on the brocade immortal, who knew if they would be able to deal with any accidents that might happen. In the end, they decided that he would stand watch while the other two dressed. While both Lang Ying and Xuanzhen peeled off their outer robes and started trying on one robe after the other. With every new robe, Shilian would give simple commands to see if they would obey, like jump or spin around. They tried on every single one of the 98 robes, both testing 40 to 50 apiece, but they didn't seem to have any strange reactions. Not a single piece of In this pile of ghost robes was the brocade immortal, and they had worked all night for nothing. Both still dressed in only a single layer, Lung Ying and Xuan Yizhen squatted on the ground while Shilian sat atop a mountain of clothes of all sorts. Supporting his forehead with his hand, Shilian mumbled, "There really is no value in buying fakes." He sat there like that for a while before seeking out Ling Wen in the communication array. "Ling Wen, I've collected some ghost robes. Even though the real brocade immortal is probably not in the pile, they're still rather wicked and troublesome to deal with. Can you send someone down to take them away?" "Acknowledged. I'll coordinate it promptly. How many pieces have you gathered?" Ling Wen answered. 98, Shilian replied. "Your Highness truly is a capable man, collecting more than what I reported to you," Ling Wen remarked. Shilian softly cleared his throat. "It actually wasn't me." But before he finished his sentence, a familiar chill ran down his spine. Shilian paused, then looked up. Upon the rows of light, flowy white fabrics in front of him, there was the dark, shadowed silhouette of a human. This time it wasn't headless, nor was it fluttering. The one standing behind those long curtain fabrics was very much a man, and the edges of his features could be easily distinguished, such as his remarkably tall height and the disheveled state of his hair. And that's the end of the chapter. We'll stop there. I think that chapter would be nicer animated, but it's so boring to me. I don't care about the fucking robes. Especially after you just go through the Blackwater arc and you're like, where is Windmaster? I remember being so frustrated. I was like, oh, why are you doing this to me?
Yeah.
Like, we still don't know where Windmaster is or if he's alive.
Right. You're gonna force me to listen about robes?
Yeah, robes, and introduce me to these new characters who, like, I love them now that I sit with them, but at the beginning it's like, I don't give a shit. Bring back my baby. Right. My Shayla.
My Shayla.
Oh, my Shayla.